So today's seminar is about your questions and about applying to CMRTO for registration as a sonographer. So we will get started because we're late. So where can I get information? All the information that we're going to be talking about today is available on the CMRTO website. So you can go there, and if you go to the top right corner, there is a section called Sonography Application, and it has two documents there that you'll want to be referring to: the DMS regulation information and FAQs, and also the how to apply, the application guide. So all the information we'll be talking about is contained in those documents, and you can refer to them at your convenience. So what is CMRTO? We're the licensing body for MRTs and sonographers in Ontario, and we regulate the activities of MRTs in accordance with two pieces of legislation: the Regulated Health Professions Act and the Medical Radiation Technology Act. It's mandatory for MRTs to be registered with CMRTO in order to be able to practice in Ontario, and it's our job to protect the public interest by making sure that our members are qualified to practice and that they're practicing professionally. I have a little video in here, but I'm not going to show it in the interest of time. Many of you will have seen it already, but it is available on our YouTube channel. Just a very short 2-minute video about what CMRTO is and how we regulate medical radiation and imaging technologists. So we protect the public through three key areas: registration. So registration is kind of the gatekeeper. We're only going to let individuals who've met all the requirements for registration to be registered and legally authorized to practice the profession. So we want to make sure all our members are competent to start with, and registration is the way that we do that. Then we have continued competence requirements. So everyone's required to do our QA program every year. And we also have standards of practice, and we have the ability to enforce those standards. So that's a key component of ensuring the quality of practice of members and the protection of the public. So a big question that comes up: why are sonographers being regulated with CMRTO? Well, it is a provincial government decision. And so the provincial government has decided to regulate sonographers with MRTs under the Regulated Health Professions Act. And that legislation governs all the health professions in Ontario. It's been around since '93, so it's been here for quite a long time. And there's 26 health professions regulated under the RHPA. So in front of you, you can see the list. So a lot of professions, and sadly, sonographers have not been there up until this point. So sonographers are now included under CMRTO. We have a long history of regulating MRTs in Ontario. We started in 1967, and in 2003, we had our fourth specialty become regulated with CMRTO with MRI. And then, of course, this year, we now have sonographers being regulated as a fifth specialty. So why are sonographers being regulated? Well, there's been a gap in public protection framework. So if you look at a diagnostic imaging department and the interprofessional care team, we have MRTs, radiologists, sonographers, and nurses, all these different groups. But you can't tell who's regulated and who isn't. And certainly the public is unaware that by having an ultrasound procedure, they could be having a procedure done by an unregulated professional, which is not consistent with the regulatory model in Ontario. So in the interest of interprofessional collaboration and consistency of the framework, it was decided, or the ministry decided, to regulate sonographers with CMRTO. And it started, there's been a lot of history, a lot of work been going on, but it started in August last year, where we got a letter from Denise Cole writing, and she's the Assistant Deputy Minister, and she wrote to Wendy Raby, who was our president, and told us that we have received direction to regulate sonographers with CMRTO starting in January of 2017. She also continued to say that by regulating sonographers with CMRTO under the same regulatory framework, this will enhance patient protection by having our minimum entry to practice requirements and ongoing oversight. And that once regulated, patients will be assured that their diagnostic medical sonographer is subject to the ongoing quality assurance and complaints and discipline mechanisms of the college. So really very much about protecting the public, and that's what the college is about. So what did we do? We got this letter on August 1st, and our council met on August 16th, and they passed 3 important resolutions. They proposed amendments to the registration regulation for circulation to MRTs and sonographers for comment, and that regulation establishes sonographers as a 5th specialty. They also approved the addition of 2 sonographers to sit on our council during the transition period until we can have elections in the specialty of sonography. And they approved an operational plan for 2017 and 2018 regarding staffing. We had to renovate our office area and also upgrade our computer system to prepare for over 3,000 new applicants and members. So this is a 40% increase in our workload. We had to increase our staffing and prepare for all this for January 1. Carolyn Trottier and Ray Lapalainen are the 2 sonographers who have been appointed to our council during the transition period. So they've been attending all the meetings since September and are fully versed on all the issues and helping council guide us through the whole process of bringing sonographers in. So what is the scope of practice of the profession? And that's an important component. And under the RHPA framework, a scope of practice is a description of what a profession does. The RHPA also establishes 13 clinical activities that pose a risk of harm to the public if they're performed by unqualified individuals. And then under our profession-specific act, each regulatory college or each profession is given the authority to perform some of the controlled acts that makes sense to their scope of practice. So here's the scope of practice of medical radiation technologists. So it's the use of ionizing radiation, electromagnetism, and other prescribed forms of energy for the purposes of diagnostic and therapeutic procedures, the evaluation of images and data relating to the procedures, and the assessment of the individual before, during, and after the procedures. And we now have sound waves included in the scope of practice statement. So that is how sonography has been brought into the CMRTO scope of practice statement. We're also authorized to perform 5 controlled acts under our legislation. So members of CMRTO are authorized to administer substances by injection or inhalation, perform tracheal suctioning of a tracheostomy, administer contrast media, or put an instrument hand or finger beyond 4 body orifices. We're also authorized to perform a procedure on tissue below the dermis and to apply a prescribed form of energy. And in this case, prescribed forms of energy means electromagnetism for MR imaging and sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. Before we can perform our authorized acts, the member must have the necessary knowledge, skill, and judgment to perform the act safely, effectively, and ethically. And we also have to have an order. So all MRTs and sonographers have to have an order from a physician or another authorized health professional for us to be able to do that particular procedure. So 2 important components when we're performing our authorized acts. So in order for sonographers to be regulated with CMRTO, we needed to have 3 regulations to make this happen. So we needed to have our registration regulation under the MRT Act, our prescribed forms of energy for the scope of practice. So that was the one we just looked at that puts sound waves in our scope of practice statement, and also a controlled acts regulation under the RHPA for the ordering and administration of sound waves. All 3 regulations were approved by Cabinet and were filed on December 20th, 2017, and they came into effect on January 1. So we didn't have a lot of time to be able to do all this. It all happened very quickly at the end of the year, but it happened, and so now we're into the regulation of sonographers. But this year, of course, is a year of transition, because there's no way we can have all 4,000, we're thinking there's 4,000 sonographers in Ontario. There's no way we can get you all registered overnight. So we have this 1 year of transition where we have started to have the legal authority to regulate sonographers, and sonographers can apply for registration, but it's not yet mandatory. We have our revised scope of practice and code of ethics and our revised quality assurance program that all came into effect on January 1, 2018. And that includes the new standards of practice to include the practice of sonographers. Our 1-year grandparenting period commenced, and so we've got this 1 year to get everybody in and get you all registered, so that on January 1, 2019, when it's mandatory that you are registered with CMRTO in order to be legally authorized to practice, that you're already there to go. And so our whole work this year has been geared towards getting everyone ready to do that. And starting in January 1, 2019, the grandparenting period will finish, and any applicant must complete an approved program and an examination in order to be registered. But we'll look at that in more detail now. So when will sonographers be regulated? You already are, but it's not yet mandatory. So by January 1 of next year, sonographers must be registered with CMRTO in order to practice in Ontario, and also to apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound. So that's what we're moving towards, that January 1 deadline. What's the protected title? Well, first of all, a protected title under the Regulated Health Professions Act assures the public that the individual is legally authorized to practice the profession in Ontario. And that once registered with CMRTO, sonographers will be able to use the title set out in the registration regulation. And so for sonographers, it is MRT bracket DMS, or you can also use the DMS on its own. That's the only specialty that doesn't have to use the MRT ahead of the specialty area. And there you can see the other 4 specialties that CMRTO regulates: radiography, radiation therapy, nuclear medicine, and magnetic resonance. So you have to be a member of the college in that specialty to be able to use the protected title. If you resign from the college, you can no longer use that protected title because it's an indication that you're currently qualified and legally authorized to practice. Who can apply for registration as a sonographer? Well, anyone who wants to practice as a sonographer in Ontario after January 1, 2019 and thereafter. So if you're going to be practicing in Ontario, and that includes individuals who are currently outside the province who think that they may want to come to Ontario sometime after January 1, 2019. And also any individual who will be applying sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound for the delivery of healthcare services in Ontario after January 1, and who is not a member of CPSO, CNO, or CMO. So another question that often comes up is, will physicians, nurses, and other health professionals be required to register with CMRTO in order to do ultrasound examinations? And the answer is no. The government determines which health professionals are able to apply sound waves for diagnostic ultrasound through the RHPA Controlled Acts regulation. And so members of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, the College of Midwives, the College of Nurses of Ontario in some circumstances, and of course CMRTO will be authorized to apply sound waves after January 1, 2019. So that's an important component. What are the registration requirements for sonographers? Well, you have to meet the requirements that are set out in the regulation. And that's the big difference with a regulatory body. All our requirements are set out in the law. And our registration regulation is part of the MRT Act and, in fact, is legal. When you submit your application, we will review it and we'll determine whether or not you've met all the requirements set out in the regulation. And we'll notify you and inform you of the final steps in the process for registration. Now that's getting in, and that's a one-time thing. So applying and becoming registered is something that only happens once. And then after you are registered, you have to meet the conditions of registration each year and attest that you're still meeting all those requirements on the annual renewal. So you only have to submit an application once. And you're only going to have to show that you've completed an approved exam or you were working just this one year. Now, we're recommending that sonographers complete the registration process in October, November, or December, but no later than the beginning of December. And that's because we're not going to be able to process all 4,000 of you in a very short time frame. So we're wanting to make sure everybody becomes registered by the end of the year, so you're ready to practice on January 1. There is an important condition on the certificate of registration, and that's the piece that keeps on going as long as you are a member of the college. And that is that you must be, you can only practice in the areas in which you are educated and experienced. So we'll look at that in a little more detail as we go through this process today. Question about the areas of practice of general cardiac and vascular sonography. So the way we're dealing with this is we have one certificate of registration for sonographers, but the general cardiac and vascular areas are considered an area of practice. So you have to have education and experience in order to be able to work in those particular areas, and also your registration requirements must be in the same area of practice, but it's one certificate of registration. What's the grandparenting provision? This is something that comes up a lot. So when we're first regulating a profession, we have to start somewhere. There's always going to be individuals who are out there practicing the profession and practicing very competently, who learned how to practice the profession before there were approved programs, before there were approved examinations, and they probably learned on the job and were even part of forming those educational programs and examinations. This is how technology and new professions evolve. So the grandparenting provision is designed to get those individuals who are currently practicing competently into the college and meeting all the standards of registration. So they have to meet the standards of practice, meet all those good things that protect the public, but we're going to recognize that they were practicing competently on the date that the profession became regulated, and then they're in. So the way our grandparenting provision is working for sonographers is if you were engaged within the scope of practice of diagnostic medical sonography on December 31, 2017, or for at least 400 hours in 2017, or for at least 1,200 hours in the prior 3 years, you're in. And so you don't have to demonstrate that you completed an approved program or an approved examination, because you can rely on your work experience to get into the college. And you're also required to provide satisfactory evidence of your competent areas of practice. So that's how the public is protected, right? We're going to let those who are competently practiced come in, and then they're going to have to adhere to the standards of practice that everybody else has to. After January 1, 2019, so after the grandparenting provision has ended, there will only be one way to get into the college, and that is you must have completed an approved program that has been approved by the CMRTO. And so there's the programs in Ontario. And you also have to complete one of the approved examinations. And so after January 1, 2019, that will be the Sonography Canada exam. So from that point on, everyone has to do the same thing, the educational program and the exam. And we just have this 1 year of transition. When and how shall I apply? That's a very common question. So everything we said is on our website. We have an online application process, and we're recommending that you apply by July 1st, 2018. So because we've got all these new applications coming through and we need time to process them, we don't want anybody to get lost in the shuffle. And if an application has to go to the registration committee, then it can take 3 or 4 months to process. So we want to make sure that we've got plenty of time to get everybody through the process and make sure that everyone's meeting the requirements. Here's the kind of timelines that we're talking about. And these timelines can be found in this document, the application guide. So at this point in time, you should be reviewing the information in the application process and getting all your documents together. You can create your online profile on the website. And you can also complete the legislation learning package. We'll go through that too. Through January and by the end of July, you absolutely should have completed your application, uploaded all your documents, paid your fee, and submitted your application to CMRTO for assessment. We'll then review it and we'll notify you whether your application is accepted or refused. And if it's accepted, then we will advise you if there's any further registration requirements, including paying the registration fee. And that will take 1 to 4 months. And then through the fall, you'll be completing any additional registration requirements. And by the time we're at the point where you're ready to be registered, that will take 5 to 10 days to pay the fee. And so once you're registered, then you can inform your employer that you're legally authorized to practice the profession, and you can start using the protected title DMS. So that's kind of how it will work through 2018. Now, the online application process has been designed for all the different kinds of applications, whether you're applying based on your work experience or whether you completed an approved program and an approved examination. It's one app, or whether you completed an international program, it's one application. And so you have to follow the steps. Just answer the steps truthfully. Upload any documents that you have to support what it is that you've completed, and follow the steps. And then CMRTO will look at your application and determine whether or not you've met all the requirements. If there's anything missing, then we'll contact you. And we'll make sure that you have all the information that you need. We want to get you in. We want to get you registered and legally authorized to practice by the end of the year. So if you go to our website, in the top right corner, you'll see the sonography application box, and you can click on that. We recommend, this is not a mobile friendly process because you're uploading documents. So we recommend that you use a computer with a printer and scanner so that you can scan and upload all your documents at the same time as you're going through the process. You can also go in and out of the application. You don't have to do it all at once. It's not until you submit the button at the very end that CMRTO will receive your application. The first section is about me. And so you need to enter your legal name and your email address. If you're already a member of CMRTO, it will link to your existing profile, and you'll just be adding this specialty. If not, you'll be creating a new profile and an application for sonography. We also need you to upload your birth certificate, passport, or permanent resident card to provide evidence of your legal name and also your date of birth. Because one of the things that we have to make sure is that you're legally authorized under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to practice in Canada. If you're not already, if you're an international applicant, you can still apply. That can be one of the things that you can do later on. But in the meantime, we do need to make sure that we can confirm your legal name and date of birth. Employment verification is going to be the first section that you're going to complete. And so we're looking for evidence that you were engaged in the scope of practice on December 31st, 2017, or for at least 400 hours, or for at least 1,200 hours. And then if none of those apply, you just indicate such, and then we'll be looking for your education and approved examination. So you can see how it starts to, how the form really kind of guides you through the process. So we get all the information we need. Here's the employment verification form. You need to complete it for each place of practice within the last 5 years. And it must be signed by your employer to provide evidence of your practice. It can be signed by your manager or supervisor, and you can upload it through the online process and keep the original. So we may ask to see the originals at some point, so you just hold on to them in case we do ask. But really what's happening here is we're relying on your employer to confirm that you have in fact been working in the profession. The competence verification is a similar kind of process. So that form again is in the application guide, and you can print it off and have your supervisor complete it. So we're looking for it to be signed by your clinical supervisor, either by your supervising sonographer, a radiologist, a cardiologist, or other reporting physician. The good thing about the practice of sonography is someone always has a look at your images and makes the diagnosis. So you can always have a cardiologist or radiologist sign your competence verification form to say that yes, you are competently performing the procedures of a sonographer. And again, you can upload that to your online application profile and keep the original. If you completed one of the approved educational programs in Ontario, and there is a list of all the approved programs in the application guide as it appears in the registration regulation, then you can provide evidence of that. And so that would be your degree, diploma, or a copy of your transcript of marks, or you can also request the program director to email confirmation directly to CMRTO. The educational programs that are approved in Canada, so outside Ontario, but still within Canada, there is a list of approved programs in our registration regulation. And so it is in the guide. So if you've completed any of those, same thing, you would upload a transcript of your marks or your degree or diploma. If you've completed a program outside of Canada, that is not one of the approved programs because we don't approve any of the programs outside Canada. So your application would be referred to the registration committee, and they will assess the educational program to determine whether the program is substantially similar but not equivalent to an Ontario program. So that's an extra step for our international applicants. And of course, you'll also be required to complete an approved examination at some point. Approved examinations. So the educational programs and the examinations go together. You have to complete both. And the approved examinations in sonography, of course, are the Sonography Canada exams in the 3 areas of practice of general, cardiac, and vascular. So if you've successfully completed those examinations, again, you upload evidence by uploading a copy of your examination results letter. Membership or certification in Sonography Canada is not evidence that you've successfully completed the examination. So we do want evidence of successfully completing the exam, and I believe you can print that off from the Sonography Canada website. Same with ARDMS. So we have approved the ARDMS examination for 2018 only. And so if you have successfully completed one of those, you can upload that evidence. Other requirements include you must practice with decency, honesty, and integrity, and in accordance with the law. So we're looking for a declaration of conduct. We're also looking for disclosure of any physical or mental condition or disorder that could affect your ability to practice. And there's other requirements there too, that you have to upload information if you answer yes to any of those questions. And of course, pay the application fee. You're also required to do the jurisprudence course, which is an online, self-directed, free program that's on our website. So you can do that at any time and print that certificate off and upload that. And that teaches you about the legislation that governs your practice. And then when you've done all that, submit your application. And we will review it and communicate with you if we need any more information. You can check the status of your application through the application portal. And then when we've assessed it, we'll notify you by email of the last steps of our registration. So how much are the fees? The application fee is $100 plus HST. There is a registration fee, which is due on the member's birthday and is paid annually. The fees are set out in our bylaws and are reviewed by council every year. CMRTO is a not-for-profit organization, but self-regulation is self-funded. And so this is the cost of regulating in the public in order to protect the public. So what do my fees cover and why is it so expensive? Council reviews the fees every year and approves the budget. And in fact, all our audited financial statements are available in our annual report on our website. We have received no help from the government to regulate sonographers, and the cost of regulating sonographers is front-loaded. We've already incurred many of the costs of regulating sonographers, but we don't yet have the benefit of the registration fees from sonographers. So we won't be receiving the revenue from those fees until later on in 2018 and in 2019. Our council has approved the use of CMRTO's current reserves, which have been paid for by CMRTO members, or MRTs. And so those reserves will need to be replenished. And so a common question is, will there be any impact on the CMRTO fees? We don't know yet. We won't know until the end of 2020 when we know how many members we have and what our costs are. Then we'll be able to know if there will be any change in the fees. I'm already registered with CMRTO in another specialty. Should I add sonography? If you're eligible, yes. All you need to do is to submit your application and your one-time application fee and meet the requirements. So it's one annual registration fee, no matter how many specialties you hold, whether it's 2 or more, just one registration fee. So that's a good thing. And then you'd be able to use both specialties in your protected title. If you're not performing procedures on patients, that's okay. You should still become registered if you're involved in education, management, research, or administration. And especially if you want to use the protected title, then you need to become registered. Sometimes your employer will require you to be registered. But also, if you're going to be relying on the grandparenting provision, you should definitely do it in 2018 because it's not going to be available after December 31st. Will CMRTO be changing its name? Hopefully, yes. We expect that there will be a new piece of legislation passed to come into force on January 1, and that will change our name to the College of Medical Radiation and Imaging Technologists of Ontario. So again, we're preparing for a new name, and there's a lot more transitions that will be happening in 2018 and in 2019 if the name change is approved. And that is through the MRIT Act. So who are all these organizations? Why do we have to belong to all of them? We've already talked about Sonography Canada and ARDMS. So CMRTO, we're the regulator, Ontario only, mandatory registration. We have enforceable standards of practice, and our job is to protect the public. The OAMRS is an association, voluntary membership, and they advocate on behalf of its members. They also provide professional liability insurance coverage. Both Sonography Canada and ARDMS are national associations, and they are certification bodies. They have certification examinations. But once you're through that, they have voluntary membership. It's your choice whether or not you choose to maintain your certification. So regulator is mandatory, and all our processes are established in law, whereas associations and certifications tend to be more voluntary. They can set and administer certification exams, and they support their members through education, advocacy, PLI, jobs postings, those kinds of things. So you see, that's why we're separate, because there's a fundamental conflict of interest between those two roles. So Sonography Canada, we've selected their certification process as our ongoing examination into the future. And that's because they have a national competency profile, they have a Canadian examination, and they have certification in the 3 areas of practice that match our approved educational programs. So we've got general, cardiac, and vascular. And it's also recognized in all Canadian jurisdictions. But before you resign from your associations and certification bodies, you need to think about other things. So although CMRTO is the mandatory part, there's other more nuanced things that you need to think about. So, you know, your employer might require certification in a particular area of practice through Sonography Canada or ARDMS. I know pediatrics for sure, they're looking for certification with the pediatric components of ARDMS. Where will you get your PLI, and will you be covered appropriately? What other professional value do I get from my association? Will I want to practice outside Ontario sometime in my future? Don't forget, CMRTO is only Ontario-based. So if you want to practice outside Ontario, then it might be to your advantage to maintain your certification in the other organizations. What the regulator can't do, we can't regulate the use of diagnostic ultrasound by other professions. So we regulate sonographers, not the use of the technology. That's the government's job to do that. And so that's, we also can't regulate the use for non-medical use. Again, that's a government decision. Nor can we influence union activities, collective agreements, or work conditions. So we can't say you're going to get paid more because now you're regulated. No, that doesn't happen. All those processes are completely separate from the regulatory college processes. Do I need to have PLI? Yes, you do, and you need to make sure it's in agreement with the CMRTO bylaws. And your responsibilities as a regulated professional, you really need to understand and comply with the legal and ethical requirements that govern the practice of the profession. So for you this year, you need to apply and register with CMRTO in 2018. And then after that, you'll need to renew your registration annually. You need to meet and maintain the standards of practice. Practice only in those areas in which you have the knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely. Complete our QA program every year, and we will be having future information sessions about the QA program because I know there's lots of questions about that. You have to adhere to the standards of the professional conduct standards and the code of ethics, maintain PLI, and then you're also you're able to participate in the self-regulation of your profession by electing your peers to counsel or even running for counsel yourselves and commenting on consultations. So easy to keep up to date. Review our website, Facebook page, Twitter, our legislation learning package. Easiest way is to read your email. We only send you stuff that you need to know about. So now we have, once you become an applicant, we have your email address, so we will communicate with you that way. And tell your colleagues. So it's going to be a busy year, and hopefully I've answered most of your questions today. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but we are here and we're not going anywhere. We'll answer all your questions throughout the year. So don't panic, but get your application started. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you.